All right. Well, welcome to the Sea Change Winter Summit Brave Truths Conversation sessions. And my name is Raphael Bemperad. I'm a founding partner of the brand consultancy and founding B Corp called BBMG, based in Brooklyn, New York. And I'm delighted to be joined by Caroline Dwell and by Dylan Gohill for our first Brave Truths conversation. And I'll introduce our conversation partners in a minute, but I wanted just to start by setting some brief context for the conversation that we're embracing today. So we all know that a rising generation is expressing urgency and skepticism about the world that we live in and a series of pressing issues that we're facing that are coming together like never before. And we know that young people are eager to take action to create positive change in society. And at the same time, we know that brand leaders are recognizing that what got us here won't get us to where we need to go. Today, the vast majority of young people are looking for significant and structural change in our economy around the world. And in the United States, Gen Z is 3 times more likely than boomers to say that they have personally been greatly affected by climate change in their own lives within the last year. The frame for today is a recognition that to regenerate the system, we have to regenerate the way we work together. And regeneration requires us to rethink and to repattern the problems that we face and how we can work together to solve them. So our team at BBMG is really delighted to be teaming up with B Lab and the team at Sea Change to champion intergenerational design as a way of uniting the wisdom and the passion and the creativity that exists across generations in order to challenge assumptions and turn brave truths into leadership opportunities. And that is ultimately the aspiration and inspiration for our conversation today with 2 amazing human beings and leaders in their own right in business and in activism. We have Caroline Dwell, who's the founder of All Good Products, which is a B Corp and an environmentally friendly body care company. And we have Dylan Gohill, who is the co-coordinator of Extinction Rebellion Youth LA in Los Angeles and the national communications coordinator for Extinction Rebellion Youth. And Dylan is a junior in high school and currently studying the semester in Washington, D.C. Welcome to both of you, and thank you for joining our Brave Truth conversation. Hello.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here with both of you.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited for this conversation.
Right on. And I would love to start in the frame of each of us meeting one another as human beings. There is an incredible social psychologist named Jonathan Haidt, and he wrote a book called The Righteous Mind. And inside of that, he talked about to really understand a human being, understand what is sacred to them. And so I'd love to begin our conversation as humans and to meet one another prior to our role, prior to our context, specifically in business or activism, but just meet one another as humans. And I'd love to know if you could share a story that is really rooted in what is most sacred to you. And in our prep conversation for today, we started by thinking, could there be or might there be an artifact or an image or a story that captures what's most sacred to you? And I'd love to begin with that. And Dylan, would you get us started just by sharing a little bit about you and what you find to be most important in your life?
Of course. Thank you so much. So my name is Dylan Gohill. I use he, him pronouns. And as Raphael mentioned, I'm 16 years old. I'm involved with this group called Extinction Rebellion Youth. We are a climate advocacy group that is youth-based, that focuses on climate justice in the sector of racial justice and labor justice in the United States and in our local groups across the country through acts of nonviolent civil disobedience and direct action and art and theatrics. And so I've been involved with them since 2019, and I'm still involved with them even while I'm studying in DC. And so an object that is sacred to me, and when I first got this question, this is the first thing that kind of came to my mind, is this ring that my grandma gave me a couple weeks ago. It says love on it. And this ring, when my grandparents immigrated here to the United States, was one of the first items that they bought for each other. My grandpa bought this ring for my grandma right as they immigrated here, just, as a symbol of like their love and like their gratitude for being here in this country. And I always wear it every day, no matter what. And it just really shows me like the resilience of my family and, our roots here in the United States. And so it's one of the most sacred objects to me. And I'm just really grateful that I have it and I get to wear it. My grandma, before giving it to me, said that she went through like this big safe that she had of like all her jewelry and saw it and said like, this is a Dylan ring. This is something that Dylan needs, and took it out and like gave it to me. And so it's one of the most important objects in my life. When my hand gets too big to wear, I'll probably put on a necklace, but it's gonna be one of those things I'm gonna keep with me forever.
Beautiful. Thank you, Dylan. Caroline, what comes to mind for you?
I just want to say thank you for that story, Dylan. Thanks for sharing. It's so cool to hear. So I live somewhere between that everything is sacred and nothing is sacred. And I'm going to share a story about an object that I chose that, without really knowing Dylan, reminded me of him anyway. This is a Buddha carved out of soapstone. And the story is that, well, at a very young age, I was exposed to music from the 60s and 70s. And through the lyrics of that music, became very curious about the atrocities of the Vietnam War. And I graduated high school at 16 and turned 17 that summer, and took the year before I went to college to travel and work around the world and learn more and embed myself in cultures. And one of the places I landed was a refugee camp in Thailand, where I taught English to hill tribes, Hmong and Lahu people who had been kicked out of what was the political boundaries of Vietnam. And I worked there with a doctor whose father had been a doctor in Vietnam, and gave me the opportunity to travel with him to go see some of the sites in Vietnam where US had bases. And so the first kind of mind blow to me was that I was with these refugees who had spent 20 years getting out of the hill tribes of Vietnam, and I could get on a plane and travel there for 2 weeks. So it became that humility of privilege of being an American. Although I also learned very quickly, I was able to get a visa in Bangkok, but in Vietnam at the time, Vietnam had not lifted the US embargo. So when I was traveling there, we had to say that we were Russian if we wanted to visit any of the US sites. The only way to get around was with a driver, and we hired a driver who would take us to these places. I got to see firsthand the effects of napalm bombing, of Agent Orange, and crawl in the tunnels that the Vietnamese had created. Our driver realized that it was pretty emotional and intense for us to see all of these places that were such atrocities, undetonated landmines everywhere. And so he made sure that we also visited Buddhist temples. And he bought me this. We drove around in an Isuzu, and we called this the Isuzu Buddha. And to me, this symbolizes the importance of having calm within chaos. And also, in many spiritualities, when there's a venerated object, one of the traditions is to walk around it in a full circle. And to me, that's the symbol of the importance of seeing all sides of things. So I went into Vietnam, traveled there at 17, a pretty righteous activist already. And I came out realizing I had so much to learn. And this Buddha reminds me of that. Thank you.
Wow, Caroline, thank you. Dylan, thank you both. I'm inspired by what you've selected, the love ring of resilience that captures the aspirations of your family as immigrants in the United States, and to some degree, Dylan, the inheritance that you hold and the obligation for the future you want to create for yourself, your peers in the world. And Caroline, in a moment of chaos for our country and the world that we were inflicting in the Vietnam War, raising all of these dynamics about where is power, what is our role, and what is, particularly in the American context, who are we and what are we in this story, which is a really challenging dynamic. And I think if we put it in the context of where we are now, a climate crisis, the racial justice reckoning or caste system reckoning around the world, income inequality like never before, a crisis of democracy in at least our country. There's so much coming together. And as we think about our aspirations for change, each of you could have chosen many different paths. Caroline, you chose to start a business and to work within the system of our economy. Dylan, you have chosen in, your youth to put a lot on the line, and to stand for your values as an activist with Extinction Rebellion, challenging the L3 pipeline, directly taking action against Chase and other financial institutions who are, basically fueling the fossil fuel industry. And so I'm curious, with the choice that you had, one is a choice to be inside of business, the other to challenge business. Why this path to change? As a business leader, Caroline, why did you choose this as your way of making your greatest contribution or your greatest impact in the world? Caroline, if you don't mind starting.
Yeah, so really I see the path as the collaboration of the work that we all do together. And to me, being within business is simply a vehicle on that path. And I think we all change vehicles, whether it's we're walking on our feet or on a bicycle or whatever it is. Right now, the vehicle for me happens to be business. And I think the only reason that I was willing to accept it, it's funny, I don't know, I don't not take responsibility for choosing it, but it kind of fell in my lap. That's a longer story. I mean, just in terms of actually walking down the road of being in business. But the reason why I was willing to accept it is because I started to see how commerce and how an energy exchange was simply a way of doing things and an inevitability. So it actually fascinated me to be able to consider the idea of creating change within that energy exchange versus accepting that all of it is inherently bad.
Cool. That's a really helpful way of conceptualizing business as an energy exchange between two parties or more to create value. So I'm curious, Dylan, and then we'll ask each of you just to connect with each other. I can step back. I'm curious of all the things that you could be doing are you now 16, 17 years old?
16.
16. Okay. So as a 16-year-old, there's a lot you could be focusing on, but you've chosen inside of your life as a student and as a son and a grandson, to make this a big part of who you are. And I'm curious, why did you choose activism as your path to making your greatest contribution?
I'd say for me, I think I chose activism because I felt like a lot of the times stuff wasn't being done, and so it was more of the thing that's something like nothing is being done and I needed to. And so I started getting involved in activism when I was a freshman in high school, right as I was still getting my footing in the world, basically. And so I think for me, what I realized is, I've done recycling drives, you've done canned food drives, you've done, like getting more water fountains, recycling and, doing all these things that like are focusing on individual levels. Like, like the year before I became like a big activist, I got like Meatless Mondays instituted at my school. And I was happy with it, I was having fun, but then what I realized is a lot of the times, like there's so many broader issues that aren't being tackled by the little things I can be doing in my community. And so looking both on a hyper local level and seeing all the injustice going on in my hometown of LA, and then looking broader wise and seeing the United States and seeing the world, it made me really reckon with myself and think, well, what am I doing in my life? And so to then I'm, balancing the, doing school. I'm like at school right now, there's textbooks behind me. And so I have like the school aspect of my life that I'm still trying to grow myself as a person and still trying to get the education that I need to pursue further things in the world. But as of right now, as youth, we don't really have many options. And so I'm an activist because I have to, and I'm an activist versus any other option is because I can't vote. I can't, be hired for a long time legally. I can't sign a contract, and so a lot of the times, the only way that our voices can be heard to the extent that it is when we are out in the streets, are out there doing these conferences, having the platform that we're so graciously given to us, because a lot of the times that's the only way we can really effectuate the change that we need to.
I'm curious, Dylan, what is most keeping you up at night right now as you think about the issues that Extinction Rebellion Youth is trying to tackle? And with that in mind, what questions do you have of Caroline about her context in business and the role that she and peers in the business world are playing around those things? So what's keeping you up at night, and what does that raise for you as you think about the role of business in change?
So I'll kind of start with what's keeping me up at night. What I think I've realized is like a lot of the times in activist communities, there's a lot of burnout and a lot of like high levels of anxiety and stress. And the reason that I'd say that is because, when we see things like climate change, when there's so many different things happening because of this larger issue of climate change, we have, sea level rise, we have global warming, we have like different things that like are subsets of this broader idea of climate change, but there's so many things going on across the entire world that if we focus on it gets a lot. And so what I've noticed a lot is as like humans and as people, we tend to either tone it down, the severity of the issues going on, or we tend to block it out. And so we have people who are denying that climate change is a thing, and then we have people thinking that climate change isn't as big of a deal as it is. And most of the time, the people that do recognize that it's a big deal are the ones that are on the streets, and then realizing of how big it is, and like reading up about how big of a deal this is and how much we're facing this global issue, we freak out and have all these weird feelings of uneasiness and unrest. And so I say for me, like, because I'm aware and because I'm like really paying attention to everything going on, the small city council bills that are up for passing, or like really seeing what senators are voting on, or like looking at what Chase is investing in, like, because I'm really hyper aware of everything going on, a lot of the times that's what's keeping me up. So what's keeping me up is knowing that there are pipelines in the works right now. What's keeping me up is knowing that a lot of people are pursuing opening up more oil and gas sites. What's keeping me up is that Chase is still investing in fossil fuels. And so I think like that's really what freaks me out, is a lot of times like we can't tone it out. And when we do, the severity of the issue goes down, and then no one can solve anything. And so kind of my question for you, Caroline, and I don't really know if this isn't really segue perfectly, but what I realize is like I'm really appreciative of a lot of the businesses that have shifted their mindset and have really like focused more on like sustainability and really gone through the path that we need them to. What I've also noticed is a lot of the time sustainability is something that's seen as like more of a more of a trend and more of a thing that like it's trendy to go to sustainability, and like a lot of businesses, whether or not they're sustainable or not, are labeling themselves as sustainable because it's good for business and it's good for people, to their audience. Not saying that all good is doing that at all. And so my question kind of for you is like, what do you think of businesses that are marketing sustainability to get more product and to get broader audience interactions? And have you or will you market sustainability in the future?
Great question. And yeah, and I get what keeps you up at night also. So greenwashing is the word that comes to mind when you speak that way. And it's certainly upsetting, right? It's a bummer that we would shout out that solutions are happening without the actual underlying results being laid down. So, I mean, what do I think about that is, I think it's a big fat bummer. At the same time, the hope that I have to have in it is that if there's a marketability to it and there's an interest in it from consumers, ultimately businesses are driven by consumers. And so if that actual interest is coming from consumers, then the greenwashing will only last so long, because people will start to demand transparency. And transparency in business, to me, has been the most radical shift from a concept of marketing environmental responsibility or sustainability, social responsibility or sustainability, and it actually happening. So I think there are degrees of it all the way through, that there's always an effort being made in one direction or another. But ultimately, I have to rest with the hope that what's real will come through. And so I kind of lay on that. And, in terms of all good, we started in 2006. And sometimes I would hide our sustainability. because it wasn't popular. I wouldn't tell people that we use tree-free paper or that we grew our own herbs on our own farm because it felt like it wouldn't actually help our business grow or be popular. And so initially we were just, our product is effective. It works well. It's amazing. It feels good. It smells good. And hey, guess what? If you're interested, pull back the layers and see what we do. And so that is one role that I play in the business community, is helping drive that as well, just in terms of making sure people are being transparent, being real, and making products that last and are useful versus just simply extractive and destructive.
I'm
I really
curious.
appreciate you answering my question.
Thanks, Caroline. And I'm curious, you've done a lot at All Good. You're a B Corp, you're a member of 1% for the Planet. You're a pioneer in being climate neutral certified. You've committed to wildland farming. I'm curious, having looked at your impact report, how are you trying to both, on one hand, lead the industry and show there is a better way to make products that are good for people and the planet, and on the other hand, really hold that integrity of both what you're doing right, but also the ways that you know that there's more to do. And so how do you hold that honesty that, yeah, you're making progress and you're being transparent with third-party certifiers, and at the same time, how do you acknowledge the work yet to do? And I'm even thinking about, you are a member of the personal care industry's justice, equity, diversity, inclusion task force, and the role of equity inside of racial justice inside of the industry. So how are you navigating leading transparently while also acknowledging the work yet to do?
Well, I think almost the answer is in the question, honestly, because being transparent just allows for all of that to come through. There's no way to pretend like we're leading and solving all the problems if we're being transparent. So when we're honest and we say we're up against massive issues on a day-to-day level, issues of transportation and issues of packaging and issues of equity and inclusion, knowing that we face those problems and knowing that the change is only going to come by the effort that we make, not by shouting out the sort of, not by celebrating the results that we think we've created. To me, that's where it's at, is just continuing with an acknowledgement that it's an ongoing movement. It's not, there's no end game in a sense.
Awesome. Dylan, any follow-up to that before I ask Caroline what's keeping her up at night?
No, I don't think I have much to add on to that. That was a great response. I'm really excited to hear more about what you think about at night, Caroline.
Cool. So yeah, back to you, Caroline. What is keeping you up tonight at night? And in the context of that, what question or invitation do you have for Dylan as you think about his role in activism as a path to change?
Well, macroscopic or microscopic, there's so many ways to answer that question, but I'll settle with one of the things that concerns me is that we as humans perpetuate the definition of insanity, in that we keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect different results. So that's the biggest piece to me. And you said it in the beginning, Raphael, that what got us here is not going to get us out of here. So in my deep gratitude and appreciation for your dedication and what you're doing, Dylan, my question to you is, how do you know if people are hearing what you're saying? How do you know if people are listening?
I think for me, the biggest thing that makes me like gauge on whether or not like we're being heard is, the feedback of those around us. And so there are times, I'm not gonna lie, I've been like, people have not heard what we're gonna say, but sometimes, so we have different levels of things that we focus on. And so there are times that we'll be like, this right here specifically for the community. We're here today to make sure people around us are aware, and we're dedicating time, dedicating space in order to not necessarily educate, but to inform. And there are times where it's focused more on those committing the harm. And so if I'm outside the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, I'm not there for the community. I'm there for those inside LADWP to hear me and what I'm demanding. If I'm in the middle of the park with a table and a bunch of flyers, that's for the community. And so I think for me, my biggest form of like getting those involved, because it affects everyone, is to really focus on getting in touch with those in your community. So focus on the school, focus on the church, focus on, the synagogue, the mosque, everything going on that, people are focusing on inside together, and then you go out together. So, I think like activism is one of those things that's constantly evolving. And so especially since I've been doing this for so long, like there have been times where we just like go out in the streets and have like 20 people there, and that doesn't work. And so there's times where we have to really step back and really focus on building the relationships and then going out again. And that's what I'm really trying to pursue now, is like getting in touch with the community. And so we're pursuing, conversations with schools, and, really like going in and saying, we're your age, we're the school down the street, this is what we're doing, this is what we want to do. If you want to get involved, get involved. And so it's not necessarily one of those things that we're trying just to like make noise and make ruckus. We're trying to really build those relationships. And once those relationships are fostered and strong and connected, that's when we, target the man, like the bigger entity. And there's power in numbers. And so hopefully after we have built those relationships, and when we target the larger thing, that's how we know we're being heard, because there's going to be, a gaggle of people behind us. They're all demanding the same thing. I don't know if that answers your question.
So Dylan, Extinction Rebellion is named 4 demands: to tell the truth about the climate emergency, to achieve net zero by 2025 in a legally binding way, to host citizens' assemblies to oversee policy change, and to shepherd a just transition that prioritizes the marginalized, the vulnerable, and indigenous sovereignty. What is the role of business in meeting those demands? And what might Caroline and the rest of us listening today and in the B Corp community do in partnership with you as you think about meeting those demands? So what is the role of business inside of this?
So what I think is amazing about the Extinction Rebellion demands, and specifically, and a lot of the specific words in it are still being revised and all that. We don't know if it's 2025 or 2030. Obviously, like, as time moves on, we're all figuring out the different deadlines. But what I think is awesome is that there are these 4 over-encompassing ideas that can get adapted into any major thing. And so Extinction Rebellion has targeted, and even in my experience, targeted entities that aren't even similar to each other. We've targeted Chase Bank, and then, the next day we'll target like LGBTQ, and then the next day we'll target like the film industry. I mean, they don't really have that much in common. But the thing is that all these demands fit for all 3 of them. Because the ideas are the same. And so we think about it and we look, okay, how can, we tell the truth? It says, tell the truth, that's a big slogan on it. And now look at your business, look at your specific model and say, how can we as businesses tell the truth? And so Caroline touched upon it. How do we be transparent? How do we make sure they're not doing greenwashing? How do we, be really out there and open with the public? The next one is act now. And like act now is they're so basic, because there's so many ways that we can interpret act now. Cut your emissions by 2025, 2030, whatever the specific deadline is, relatively soon. How do we look at our supply chain? How do we look at our packaging? And then, the biggest one that is, I think, the most integral in Extinction Rebellion is the just transition. And so look at your unions, look at your workforce. Who is working for you? What's the demographic? Why is it that demographic? How do we change it? Where are companies where is your business located? Why are they located in said parts of said neighborhoods? Why are they located in said cities? And so to me, I always take these as just like a guiding principle. And I have these guides of how I want to live my life and how I want the world to live. And I take those guides and I adapt it to every single thing that I tackle. And so, yeah, that's kind of the 4 demands.
Cool. Thank you. And Caroline, you've talked about being really on a mission to live in harmony with nature and doing right by the mothership as a sort of a corporate mantra and commitment, taking responsibility for our overall impact as a company, embedded in the DNA of All Good. So I'm curious, like, what are your imperatives or your core principles that are guiding you through where we are today? And then what would be your invitation for the role that activism might play in your company's work and impact. So what are those kind of key imperatives you're trying to navigate, and how might Dylan and Dylan's peers play a role?
So as a business, we always like to step it up a notch higher than we think where we are. So, you know, we elevate the platform to a new level, and that keeps us growing and adapting and learning. We think it's really important to involve and awaken and educate community, and invite them into the process of decision making. So, and that of course includes our customers and all of our stakeholders. And then to continually regenerate hope in humanity and hope in the possibility of change. You know, even just a specific example is we make a mineral sunscreen. And like I said before, we're hoping for people to understand that that chemical sunscreens are completely not only destroying just the coral reefs, but also their internal body systems. But we can't just shout that out and have that be some sort of scare campaign, right? We have to come at it from a level of really inviting people into the conversation and making sure that they know that they have autonomy in their purchase power and what they participate in. So I think, yeah, I mean, you know, for Dylan, I just would say, like, I'm really interested in how you will find reconciling forces in the face of resistance, how you'll come to an understanding with people that are sitting on the opposite side of the table as you. And, you know, I think that's something that, that I would both invite and then also, you know, commit in terms of like being there to make sure that there's an understanding on all sides of a certain issue, because it's so not as simple as it seems, you know. And when something seems super gnarly and bad, there are actually underlying reasons why it's going on. And I think that those underlying reasons hide the potential truths of what can bring us forward and what can actually prevent furthering the economy of extraction and destruction. It's not so much in the end result of it, but it's more in what actually created that in the first place and why do we keep doing it. And I think understanding those and understanding how that we're all humans and we all have our own stories of our own successes and our own traumas, can lead us to the experience and the decisions that we make. And so I invite you to, you know, just be on that journey of almost a journey of empathy and understanding, so that through that we can find real lasting change and not just change that furthers this opposition of resistance.
Thank you, Caroline. That's extremely powerful. I thought quite a bit about how do we move from not only resistance to evil is important, and yet at one point resistance creates a reaction loop. And so what does transcendence look like? Mm-hmm. And inside of transcendence, I think both of you today have modeled so beautifully holding the sacred, bringing curiosity, and seeking opportunity for deeper connection and meaningful collaboration in service of change. So thank you both so much for beginning the conversation. It's just the start. We're going to continue the conversation in person through the Winter Summit with Sea Change. But I just want to really express my own gratitude for what each of you is holding and leading and stewarding every day with such beauty. And I look forward to continuing this dialogue and also finding ways to explicitly collaborate for the change that we seek together. So Dylan, thank you so much. Caroline, thank you so much for being together. It was great.